Hello friends, welcome to Daily Sourdough. Today I have a great recipe for you. We are making sourdough tortilla chips. One of the all-time favorite snacks, and we are going to give it a sourdough twist to make it more nutritious and easier to digest. Let's start with 2 cups of fed starter, and it can be unfed starter, totally fine. But fed starter will give it a bit more of an airy texture. So we're going to use fed starter today. And add 2 cups of that to your bowl. So I'll leave just a little bit in my crock to feed and get it going again. I'm using almost all of it today. And to that, add 2 cups of masa. Now you can also use fine ground cornmeal. It's great. This has a little bit more of a tortilla taste to it, whereas cornmeal has more of the corn taste. Either one is really yummy. And masa is really finely ground, so it has a bit different texture, but cornmeal is also a good option. Now before you mix it up, add your salt, and you add a teaspoon of salt. This way it'll get mixed up better. Now just briefly mix that salt in with the masa so that it's really well distributed. And the final ingredient is ½ cup of oil. I prefer avocado oil because it can handle high heat and it doesn't have much flavor. You could use corn oil. I just don't like using corn oil because it doesn't handle high heat as well. So it becomes more carcinogenic to your body. Coconut oil would also work because it also handles high heat and is a better option for you health-wise. After briefly mixing this up, I'm gonna start using my hands and just squeeze that dough together until everything is completely mixed. And it's going to be kind of the texture of biscuit dough, but grainier, but kind of that consistency. And this batch actually makes 4 pans of tortilla chips. So if you don't want that many, just cut your recipe in half. However, if you're going to go to the trouble of making tortilla chips, then it makes sense to make a big batch. You can always save them and snack on them later, or serve them at your next get-together. Once your dough is thoroughly mixed, just knead it for a minute on your countertop and shape it into a loaf. It doesn't have to look beautiful. Now cut your dough in half and kind of flatten it into an oblong disc. And then wrap it tight in plastic wrap. So just like you would do pie dough, take your flattened dough and then wrap it snugly with your plastic wrap so that it will stay really soft. And then you're going to chill this while it ferments. Now you can ferment these in the refrigerator for anywhere between 1 hour to 12 hours. If you leave it 12 hours, it's going to get a little bit sour, especially in the refrigerator. I'm going to only ferment mine for between 4 and 6 hours, and then I'm going to roll them out and cook them later today. That way I still get some benefit of the good bacteria in my gut. The corn, the masa will be digested somewhat. I'll get all the good benefits of sourdough, but my chips won't be too tangy. So I'm going to put this in the refrigerator and we'll see you later today. My dough sat in the refrigerator for 5 hours and now it's time to roll it out. As I said, this recipe will make 4 pans, so I'm going to take one of my pieces and cut it into half. and roll just one of these sections out at a time. And if your dough feels dry right now, like for example, mine is just a bit crumbly. So if your dough feels dry and crumbly, keep a little bit of oil handy. And if it's falling apart, you can just squeeze it. In fact, I think I'm going to do that now. I'm going to put a little bit of oil on it, and I'm going to work it into the dough because I don't want it to fall apart when I'm rolling it out. So I'm just going to knead a little bit of oil into it before I start rolling it. And so you just go by feel. You want it to be kind of the consistency of Play-Doh, where it's a bit stiff but holds together. Now it's completely out of shape. So we want to put it back into a rectangle. Work that oil in so you have a nice, smooth but firm dough. Place it on a piece of parchment paper, the same size as your cookie sheet, your baking dish, and you're going to need to roll this out as thin as you can. Since we're not making crackers, we're making chips, you want it really thin. And that takes some real work. And try your best to keep it in a rectangular shape. It won't be perfect because you're just working with some dough here, look. And if it does that, just squish it back together. If it continues to do that, take some cornmeal and sprinkle it over the top to keep your rolling pin from sticking. And then continue to roll. And when you think you have it thin enough, then roll it again because it won't be thin enough. It does take several minutes to roll these out because you want them paper thin. So just work at it until it's almost see-through. Then they're ready to cut. And you can cut them in any shape you want, but of course we're going to cut it into a triangle today because that's a traditional style. And the easiest way to do that is to cut squares and then cut those squares diagonally. And I have a lot of rough edges here, so I'm going to have a lot of odd shaped chips. But first cut them into squares. Now cut these squares diagonally so that you have a beautiful triangle shape. And you know, it's so much easier to buy a bag of tortilla chips, but doesn't it feel good to be able to make something from scratch that's easy on your stomach, it's healthy, it's full of good bacteria, a lot of goodness for your gut health, and it's such a wonderful feeling to be self-sufficient. Besides, homemade things always taste better. After you have cut them, brush them with an oil, and be sure and brush the edges, even if they're ragged. You'll be eating those as well. And then using a coarse salt grinder or some coarse salt, pretty heavily salt your dough. Now bake these in the oven for about 20 minutes at 350 degrees, and you want them to brown up. The edges are going to get pretty brown, but that allows the other ones to cook thoroughly. You want them to brown up a little bit and then get really nice and crispy. So just keep an eye on them. Well, there you have it, friends. Sourdough tortilla chips. Really fun to make, totally out of the ordinary, and delicious too. Let's give it a try with some homemade salsa. So delicious. I could have rolled this a little bit thinner, so be sure and do that. I think my next batch in the oven is going to be better, but really tasty. So fun to serve to your family and friends, easy on your stomach. If you've made a big batch like this and you need to store them, then be sure to store them in either a metal tin or a glass container such as this, which seals, because plastic bags are not going to keep them crispy. They will go soggy. So in order to keep them crispy, store them in glass or metal just like this. It's beautiful that way as well. And friends, be sure to stay tuned because I have so many more recipes to share with you on Daily Sourdough.